Hello, and we are live. It is The View from the Top. We are going to be talking about global mobility at a pivotal moment. We're going to be talking about AI. We're going to be talking about ethics. We're going to be talking about responsibility. It is a huge, huge subject. I'm so excited. We have backstage, we have Karen Hale from Indeed, we have Nitsan Udan from Benevo, we've got Julie Onslow Cole from Fragment, and we've got Julie Barron from the Alto. So we're there for a really, really important discussion, and it is so exciting. So if you're out there in global mobility world, please join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, what's going on. We want to hear what you've got to say, where you are in the world. It is such an important subject. I'm afraid my internet just went down, so I would ask whether anybody else is happening. Nitsan, I'd ask you to come onto the screen if that happens again, so we can keep this show on the road. Apologies about that, guys. I don't know what is happening with the internet today, but what doesn't kill us keeps us stronger, and we're
All right. I guess I'm a surprise host for the show today while Brian is fixing his internet update. Oh, good.
okay. I've got no idea what is happening. I've got super fast Wi-Fi and something bad is happening, but we're going to carry on regardless. I've got Nitsan there co-presenting with me today as we move forward, but we've got people coming in from all over the world, which was great. Anyway, let's just share some breaking news. So we've got loads of breaking news. Let's get that out there whilst we have a moment. And let's say, well, happy 4th of July. Let me just say that to all our American friends. And let's just show our breaking news video. So there we are. That's all the breaking news. But I want to actually add a couple of other bits of breaking news. Super excited to welcome to the Benevo family, Laurie Ryan and Meredith Morris. So from me and from you, Nitsan, let's a big shout out to both of those who've joined us in the USA. And also a big shout out to our producer, Tally, who's not with us today. That's probably why my Wi-Fi is going down, Tally. Tally is actually off this week,
As her birthday is going to be tomorrow. I mean, this is an interesting game we play, right? Brian, you start a sentence and I try to complete the sentence. I think next, then, Michelle, please help us. Maybe it's time to bring Julia and start the immigration updates.
So who knows what is going on with the internet here today? This is getting beyond ridiculous. Anyway, so we're going to
move on to the immigration updates. That's my guess of how this sentence was supposed to end.
So we're going to move on. I'm going to bring Julia Onslow-Cole onto stage to talk about immigration.
All right. Hey, Julia.
I was getting a bit confused. I was thinking, oh, I don't look like the sun. So it's really fantastic to be able to give you an immigration update today. And I thought what I would be doing is really focusing in on Asia Pacific, because it's an area that we haven't really talked about for a while. And I think it's, there's so many important things going on. And all of our clients and global mobility leaders that I speak to say that, business is really booming for them in the Asia Pac region, and they're moving a lot of people there. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you to Mark Buchanan and Kenny Ng from Fragman, who provided me this update. The key issue from a geopolitical perspective is the looming date of the 9th of July, which is when President Trump said, unless countries have not agreed a trade agreement, then they'll enforce reciprocal tariffs. So we're very much, now on the 2nd of July, time is really running out. And this is really dominating the geopolitical agenda in the region. And if we turn to Japan, you may have read some notes in the press, but also from things that are not in the press, I know that there has been a lot of back and forth with Japan and the US, and they're very much trying to reach an agreement before the 9th of July. If not, they're facing 24% reciprocal tariffs. So that's a huge amount of reciprocal tariffs. And Japan is already suffering because of the 25% tariff on cars. So one of the issues that the US has suddenly raised is that it wants Japan to raise defense spending to 3.5% of GDP. And this is a new target, which the Japanese government are trying to come to terms with and trying very hard to make this trade agreement. For South Korea, the reciprocal tariff is 25%, and for China, 55%. And Vietnam is 46%. So I'm personally doing a lot of work with Vietnam. I will actually be going to a number of important meetings in Vietnam in the next 3 weeks. And I wanted to kind of illustrate to you what's happening with companies that are operating there and how these tariffs have a real effect. So Vietnam is the second biggest coffee exporter to Brazil. So one of their big exporters that are in Vietnam, they supply organic beans and ground coffee. They were saying in an article actually that was in the FT this week that the US accounts for nearly half of their exports. And it's not just that the US, takes half of their product, but it's that, it helps them really penetrate global markets to have a good presence in the US. And they said that if tariffs went up to 46%, they'd try and swallow some of the losses themselves, because otherwise they'd have to pass it all on to consumers and they wouldn't be able to afford that coffee in the US. But they're saying that conservatively, they're going to see a 15% decline in their monthly profits. So what this is leading to is that all countries in Asia Pacific are trying really hard to make new friends and new partners. And this is the theme I've talked about before. So we have, the US and China, are the two sort of superpowers that are in discussions around trade agreements and all other matters. And then you're seeing the other countries around this and the rise of these sort of middle countries like Japan, like Canada, like UK, who are all making new trade agreements very fast with each other to offset some of the impacts that are happening from the US tariffs. And there was an ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur very recently, where part of it was an accord which said, yes, they all want to diversify on trade, and particularly with like the Middle East and China. Now, just a few other geopolitical high points to note is that Singapore's recently had an election. There was a landslide victory for the People's Action Party. They retained their majority, and Lawrence Wong was put in power. And he mentioned the uncertainty about economic situation and the rivalry between China and the US in his political speech after he was appointed. So top of mind for him. And also overnight, you might have seen that the Prime Minister in Vietnam has been suspended. So a lot going on geopolitically. And I just want to finish by pulling out some important immigration highlights. And the first one is to say that in Singapore, although Lawrence Wong was, expressing this need about trade and attracting people, compliance is a big issue. So in Singapore, please remember to keep meeting the compass requirements. There's new salary requirements that have come in Singapore from the beginning of this year, which are very important to follow. And the compass requirements are actually very hard for companies to keep up with, because what they are is they're comparing your company with other companies in Singapore. So for example, they look at how many Singaporeans do you employ? And the trouble is that it's a percentage. So if your competitors all start employing more Singaporeans, then your percentage that you have to get points under compass goes up. So it's like a moving target. And then finally, I just want to say, I'm very hopeful that there will be some movement in Vietnam. And as I say, I will be going to Vietnam. I'll do a Benevo from Vietnam in July. And I'm very hopeful, watch this space, because the government in Vietnam do want to attract foreign investors. And, by helping move the dial on immigration, this will help foreign investors.
Julia, thank you so much. And Nitsan, thanks so much for stepping in. I'm not sure what's happening my end, but as soon as I speak for a couple of minutes, I seem to cut out. So without further ado, I'm going to move and bring Julie Barron onto stage. So hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's welcome to our stage our tax guru, Julie Barron. Hi, Julie. Oh my God, this is turning into one of these days. Karma has come for me. Julie, are you there? No, we've lost you, but we'll get Julie back later. So we're going to move on now. And we've got a quick Benevo update. So I'm going to bring Matt onto the stage to give us a Benevo update. Hi.
Hello, Brian.
Okay, Matt, give us the update, and then we're going to go back to Julie and the tax update. It's all fun. It's part of the show. So, Matt, give us the Benevo update, and we'll bring Julie back in a second.
All right. I have a quick update. With some luck, I can share my screen. If perhaps you could put that on stage, Brian. And the update that I had for everyone is that Benevo Client Advisory, has 2 global mobility benchmark surveys open. They are the Early Careers Mobility Benchmark, looking at benchmarking norms for interns and recent graduates, the segments of programs that cover those populations, and a mobility benchmark on immigration compliance management. While it says until July 2nd, we have had very good participation and had a few people that wanted to continue participating into next week. So that deadline is extended until next Friday. So if you are interested in both participating, benchmarking yourselves, and getting early access to our reports, please consider participating right after the show. And these benchmark surveys are what produce the benchmark reports by Client Advisory, leading thought leadership and an analysis of the market by our Client Advisory team. So please do so. And the final update that I had was that we have just completed our Q1 Changemakers meeting. It was very successful. We got a number of incredibly good ideas out of it. We will have our next Changemakers meeting at the end of the quarter, at the end of Q2. And so if you are a corporate global mobility professional and want to join this amazing network of thought leaders pushing the industry forward on technology and solutions to do more with the current and very exciting landscape of new technologies coming to market, please do consider joining us. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Matt. And we're now going to bring on Julie onto the stage. So we'll say goodbye to Matt and let's welcome onto our stage Julie Barron. Julie, hi.
Hello. Hi. Hopefully I can hold on here, Brian. We'll see.
Absolutely. Who knows what's happening to the world's web. So, Julie, what are we talking about today?
So I thought I would give a little update on the One Big Beautiful Bill and where we are and what's happening with U.S. tax reform. So yesterday, the Senate did vote to pass, which is now not called the One Big Beautiful Bill. They have scrapped that title. So we'll have a new title, I'm sure. But what that means is it now goes back to the House and to see if the House can agree to what the Senate changed in the bill. So I thought I would highlight a couple of the things that the Senate had published a version of the bill last week, and now they've changed back to some of the provisions and then scrapped other provisions. So I thought I would kind of go through those and the ones that really affect mobility. So the first one is the state and local tax deduction. It's a huge controversy. It almost didn't pass the House because of that. The deduction was $40,000 in the House bill. The original Senate bill had $10,000, but this version that came out yesterday, now we're back to $40,000. So that does agree with the House. So that will help get some votes in the House on this one. The remittance tax, which I think I had talked about earlier, where there was going to be an excise tax on basically anyone sending cash out of the United States. And that was going to be a 5% tax for anyone who was not a US citizen and was remitting funds overseas. So that remittance tax has now gone from 5% to 3.5%. And this latest version is at 1%. However, it exempts anyone who's transferring money from a bank account. So if you're transferring electronic funds from a bank account, you're exempt from this. But the exemption that left was the U.S. citizen exemption. So now everyone is subject to this remittance tax, but it's really only for people who send cash through a Western Union type office or something like that, not from your bank account overseas. So it's a very different tax, but it is still there and it's a 1% tax now. Apparently there was some talk that 3.5% would cause people to kind of try to skirt the rules, but if it's only 1%, people will just pay it and not think about it. So it actually would bring in more revenue to be at a lower rate. Interesting ways that politicians think. But the last one was the revenge tax. And if you recall, the revenge tax was something where foreign nationals from certain countries that were deemed to be taxing U.S. companies in a discriminatory manner were going to have to pay an additional 5% tax on any U.S. source income. So Brian, as a UK citizen, if you had 15% tax on your US dividends, you'd have to pay 20. And then the next year you'd have to pay 25. Well, that has all been scrapped because it was all based on the digital services tax and which countries were going to impose that. And from what we understand, President Trump has reached a deal with the G7 countries to not impose that tax, or at least curb it a bit. And so now no more revenge tax. That is gone. So that is the latest update on the One Big Beautiful Bill. As I said, it may be voted on in the House. We're looking at either today or tomorrow. We will see. The goal was to get it to President Trump by the 4th of July. So, okay, Brian, I think you're back. I can keep on talking, but
I'm back, and we're going to move on to our main session with Nitsan and Karen.
Great.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about technology, and I must admit, technology isn't my thing at the moment with everything that's going on with my internet connection. But it just goes to show, it takes a human can err. It's only human to err. But if you really want to foul up big time, you need technology. So we're going to be going for it. So let's just talk about it. I mean, AI is transforming global mobility in ways in which we're only just beginning to understand. So how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this, Karen?
I think we should all be super excited and maybe a little nervous. I think those two things should go together. AI is going to be, in my opinion, very transformative. It already is, but I think we're still in the early stages of what it's going to be able to do for us. And, with that, we have some responsibility in how we use AI, how we build AI, and the decision-making and accountability that goes along with that power.
Okay. And Karen, first of all, actually, congratulations, because you've joined Indeed fairly recently. I think, was it back in January of this year?
Almost 6 months ago. So I did join Indeed running their global mobility program in January of this year. Although you guys know I've been in mobility a long time. I've stopped counting years at this point. But
you're a legend of our industry, Karen. You really, really are. And we are so excited to have you on the show. But tell us about Indeed, because one of the questions about mobility, is about AI, is about the impact on work. And you guys are in the work industry. You are, I don't know if you're the biggest recruiter in the world, but you're certainly up there. So tell us a bit about Indeed and the company and your program there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly AI is going to be critical, and it's going to continue to be critical to making Indeed a great, valuable resource for both employers and job seekers in the market. But I think there's a strong belief from leadership down and from the bottom up that we all have a responsibility to be using AI in our jobs to think about how to do work more efficiently. It's part of our goals and objectives for this year. We've got some training that we all have to do regardless of our job roles within the company. And so really exciting to continue to build my skill set and my team's skill set in this area. One of the most interesting things I think that we do at Indeed, because we have I'm just going to keep going because we have really valuable, so much data that people entrust us with, is to really understand how we use the data, that we're using it the right ways. And so we have a team that we call our responsible AI team, which works very closely with our tech team and all the different functions of the company, but is actually embedded in HR. So their technical background, but they're kind of looking at the AI that we build, that we use in a different way, kind of understanding the ethics, the values, helping look for any potential inadvertent bias, disadvantaging impacts that may have on certain populations and things of that sort. So really smart people. Kudos to them. I don't have that skill set to do that job, but I'm glad they're here.
And I couldn't agree. I think couldn't agree more. Sorry, but I think this is such an important area to invest in, because we just seen like a lawsuit of someone who pursued against Workday, right? Because saying, oh, I applied to so many jobs, but your algorithm has disqualified me and discriminated me. And for a company like Indeed, it's so important to prioritize that. And because we're going to talk about different use cases of AI and where AI can make some impact. Maybe process improvement is one thing, but on talent selection, on process improvement, the likelihood of discriminating is quite small. But on talent selection, it becomes a critical part of how we, as you started, and I agree with, it's how we put the guardrails. It's how we stay in control and how we leverage the power rather than let the power take control over us.
Yeah, and I think we all have a responsibility. So obviously we have this specialized team, their technical background, but also looking at it, from a very specialized perspective. But I think we all own that. Like, these tools are still new. They're being trained on different data sets, different kind of methodologies, information that they're utilizing. So I think we have a responsibility to dig down a little bit and understand, how are the tools built? Where are they using? What data are they using to make their recommendations to us or give us the analysis? Are there ethical values, guardrails that we want to have in place to ensure that we don't stretch beyond what we think is the right thing to do? The AI doesn't know that. The AI is not human. It doesn't have those ethical judgments, although some of that may be trained into the model. But I think, it really comes down to us to decide, where are we going to use it? How are we going to use it? What do we think is acceptable? And then evaluating critically the data and results that we get out of the system to apply that additional human component of subject matter expertise and experience to make sure that we're using the output wisely.
So let me ask a question of the audience. I mean, I want to know, how do you feel about the way that our world is being transformed? And I'll give you 4 choices. You're super excited, you don't care, it won't affect you, you're really scared, or you're actually both. You're both excited and fearful. So Nitsa, maybe I'll just start this one with you. I mean, as a
Well, I guess I know the rest of the question here. I'm definitely on the excited part. I would say that my life changed since the introduction of AI, and just trying to keep up with the pace of what's happening is, on one hand, so exciting, but on the other hand, also, so I'm also a little bit on that overwhelmed. I won't say, I'm not sure if I'm afraid, but more overwhelmed. And I think, I took that advice from one of our senior developers, team lead developers, who told me that, right, if I'm trying to keep up with what's changing in AI and what's coming new, this is a full-time job. This is just doing that, just trying to keep up with what's happening is a full-time job. So we shouldn't even try. Instead, what we should try to do is to find a few resources we trust, and then make sure we only follow a few places, and know that if there is such a huge update, everyone will talk about it anyway, so I will not be able to miss that. And it doesn't really matter if one company, OpenAI, or another, Gemini or Perplexity, launch something better in their model, because what we are seeing is that everyone is catching up, right? And the pace that change is so fast. So what we need to do is to, in my opinion, is to look at a step back and say, okay, how does that impact our job? And what opportunities that this create? Yes, what are the risks as well? We should definitely look at the risks, but what are the opportunities we have? And I agree here with the comment that Paul made, right? This is the next industrial revolution. And in a way, the riskiest thing we can do, if we're talking about mitigating risk, is not do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that we have the option to ignore what's happening around us. I'll be honest, there's a lot of change fatigue, I think, in the industry. COVID was really hard on us. We've had numerous geopolitical crises, as well as, governmental changes, policy changes, regulation changes that we've all been managing through. And technology is only, in theory, a small part of our job, but obviously it touches every aspect of the jobs that we do. But we don't have the option right now to say, I don't have time to deal with this. I don't have time to learn it. I don't have, I'll kind of do what I can, but I'm not going to spend time on this. It will be, I agree, completely transformational. Is going to change how we work. And we need to be thinking about it now, not just what we can do today, which is important, but also what do we see coming? So how do we think work's going to be? It's hard to make predictions, of course, but how do we see work being transformed? What does that mean for our team? What does it mean for our programs? Certainly, it's going to open up some great new options. Our ability to truly be data-driven programs is going to be much easier than it's ever been before. To use that to really help, educate, train, share information with our business stakeholders will, be unlimited going forward if we do it right. But it also means other things. Like mobility, as you know, has often been seen as a largely transactional function. Well, those transactions are going to be largely automated. So when that work goes away, what does that mean for our teams? what are we going to use that time that we've freed up to do, and how do we go forward? Do we need to do reskilling, upskilling? Do we need to look at work that in the past we didn't have time to take on that now we can, whether that's within our function or additional functions that maybe could be rolled into the mobility program. So the time to start thinking about that is now. We can't wait till everything's automated and then stop and look around and say, okay, we've got people without clear work. So we need to be working on all of this simultaneously.
And I'm going to come in and ask a question, which I'd like you to do as an open question, and we'll see what the audience says.
And the question is, if AI could do anything for you at work, what would make the biggest impact, right? And think about that as an in-house mobility person. I know there are maybe other guests we have on the show, but that's the focus we want to have here. I'll try to answer on this. So that's going to be a live challenge for me once you write this, in terms of what capabilities can be done with today's technology, what might be coming later, and what that's maybe a good idea for someone to work in. And I think connecting, Karen, to what you said, I agree. This is like a really a strategic opportunity, because you mentioned the word data, which already gets me excited. Because I think if I try to simplify mobility more and more and more, the word that repeats there is the word data, because in so much of what we do, that's what is eventually driving it. Even compliance, right? What do we do in compliance? We count how many days people are staying in a country. It's all about data. And then being able to have a strategic conversation, as we know, right? When it comes to those tables, the first thing they're going to ask is the data. And that's what we need to really strive and see, okay, now that we are freeing up our time, we need to sort out how we free up that time. But assuming that will happen, how do we start to become strategic? Because similar to you, as you experience across different companies, since the pandemic, there's been a big shift, right? And we've seen the amount of work on mobility is growing, but headcount is dropping. And that's across all companies. All companies is experiencing that. Our industry is experiencing that, right? There's 20-30% drop in volume across the industry year over year. It means that we can't just do what we've done last year and expect, okay, this will continue. Anything from job security to vendors in how they operate, to even what's the purpose of that role. And I think that brings questions that are sometimes I can definitely connect to. Why is it scary? But
yeah, and I think one thing we haven't talked a lot about with AI is, as program leaders, how in program on the corporate side, as well as if you're on the supplier side, what does this big change mean for our supply networks, and how are they using AI? So I think we have the responsibility to be talking to them about these conversations. What are you building? How are you plugging it in? Who's monitoring it? What level of work's being done by the machines, and what level of work's being done by humans? What does this mean for the secondary supply network? So if your RMC is using other subcontractors, what are they doing? Now, we know some of the work is still going to be done by humans. It's going to be a human that loads, at least for now, all the household goods onto a truck, right? And drives the truck across the country. But, certainly, where's AI involved, and what kind of monitoring responsibility are the suppliers taking for managing and ensuring that the output's being used ethically in the right way, and that it's transparent. I think transparency is going to be really important in these conversations, so that we understand how things are being done, who's doing what, make sure that there is a level of human critical examination. For instance, we don't want just automatic emails that haven't been pre-vetted going out, because there's still, as we know, some flaws in the AI at times. So we really need to make sure that there's at least a human review on things before things are sent, for instance, to our employees. So I think that's an important thing to talk about. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in RFPs going forward. What kind of questions are going to be coming, being asked, what the knowledge and understanding is of the various audiences.
Absolutely. And, interesting you're touching into RFP, because that was one of the first things we looked internally on how we utilize AI. Because as a company who receive RFP, just imagine, right? Every time it's 300 questions, it's this very similar questions, but in a different format. So you can't copy paste, right? But these are kind of the opportunities, but we've never submitted an RFP response without reviewing it.
Right.
So of course we're using AI because otherwise we will not be productive, right? But
I mean, there's potential for huge time savings there on both ends, both from the suppliers completing the RFP as well as the analysis of what you receive. But again, I think there still needs to be that level of customization, the showing that you really understand the specific customer and what their needs are. And as again, program leader, I want to feel like suppliers I'm working with understand who we are, and they're really trying to connect with our needs, not just giving me kind of a cookie cutter answer, so to speak. But it is, it is going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. But potential huge time savings. I can tell you one interesting thing I did. We use Google Suite, so just using Gemini, which I think will continue to get better and better. But I took some of our contracts with our current suppliers and kind of asked Gemini to analyze them and highlight areas that would create potential risk for our company in the contract terms. So next time we get to the need to discuss contracts, can highlight some of those and think about, are there ways to mitigate some of that and eliminate some risk? Of course, I can do that as a human, and I will also do it as a human, but it may help me spot things that I may have missed on my own. So
exactly, right. So that's what its value, right? It helps us. It gives us superpowers, and we have to utilize that, because there might be 100 contracts and we will not get to read all 100 contracts. But here we can do one. We can give the feedback, iterate, improve our prompt. Because the key for writing good prompts is not trying to do one and get it done, but actually iterating on that, improving it, learning from the feedback. And and thinking one of the examples we had, and we're going to have a big announcement on AI coming in 2 weeks. I'm not going to do any spoilers today, but one of the areas we already launched about 4 months ago, an employee-facing kind of an AI chat engagement that took the employees' questions, the question that used to come to our team, the question that used to go into the mobility team. And when we launched that, it was able to resolve 40% of the questions, which, we found out that was quite good, right? 40% of questions now has been reduced, 40% of the amount of work has been reduced, and employees are getting faster responses, so they're happy as well. We saw satisfaction going up. But when we then, what our team started to do is to start to look at the answers that are not being, the questions that are not being answered. And they said, a lot of people are asking about their specific needs, so not just their policies, not just about the program, but also about what's the status of my visa application. I've used already, can I submit an expense reimbursed for a night out with my partner? All of these questions that are hyper specific. So when we've added that context, we've seen that number jump to 68%, right, of answers. That now, right, last 2 weeks, we are already at 80%. And just, whenever we talk to mobility, I didn't say a lot of people answering yet that on the comments. So if you do have things that what you would like AI to do for you, please share that. One of those that keep coming is, I just wanted to handle that inbound of questions that I get. Well, definitely that is something that is very solvable.
Yeah, I saw Lori put a comment here about the one that's up on the screen now about helping with onboarding and making quizzes for herself. So that's another creative way to use it. I think right now, a lot of times, because it's a new technology and we're learning as we go, and the technology is actually evolved faster than maybe as we as humans can learn and adapt to it. But certainly one of the thoughts is look at different kinds of AI, LLM personas that you can use. So I think right now a lot of people think of it as kind of a fancy autocomplete, or if you're stuck on how to start a draft of a document or a presentation, you can use AI for that. And certainly those are good use cases, but there's more that you can do. So for instance, if you're kind of making decisions, then you can certainly put that into AI and tell it to play devil's advocate and tell you, where the flaws may be in your logic or your assumption. You can use it as a bit of a debate partner. Clearly your human colleagues and friends are great for that too, but it may help you see blind spots that you didn't even know you had, or information that you may be overlooking in your decision-making thought process. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use AI. And I think we're just at the beginning of trying to figure that out and trying to build those in. But certainly I would encourage everybody get out there and experiment, try different things. But of course, don't trust it completely. You still use your ethics and your human logic to apply, to kind of critically evolve. So, one of the things I think AI can't do is really be that connective tissue in the work that we do as far as what are our priorities, why are those the important priorities right now, what really makes the difference to the business. It's good at those transactional, task-oriented items, but we still have to be that connective tissue that runs across the what, the why, the how, and putting the big picture together.
I agree, and I think that's a great example in terms of asking it to challenge our thinking, and in a way, often when we engage with AI, sometimes it's trying to please us. So it's a good idea to actually ask it to save it to their memory or change the setting of the persona, to ask it to always, assuming that's what you want, to challenge what you think. If you just want reassurance of what you think, then that's great. But if you want to be challenged, you can actually change that settings in the definition and ask it to actually try to look at that from a different point of view. So it's really interesting, and I agree with you, right? This is a new technology, so the key thing we need to do is to keep sharing with each other what we learn, because that's how we get better. I mean, one of the top tips I've heard about is that when we get an answer from, if for example, talking with a chat interface such as Gemini or Copilot or any other, we can reply to it back and say, hey, this answer that you gave me, I give you a score of 1. Now do a level 5. Level 1, level, and ask it to do it. You'll see that this is that, and then ask for level 20. And you'll see that you actually come back with much, much better answers. So I think, those are the kind of tips that people are coming across, and being able to share that is what will really drive this knowledge, because there's no yet, like a defined playbook. Do this, do that.
Yeah, it's interesting, that point that you mentioned about AI wanting to make us happy. Obviously, that's something we as humans like to make each other do, and it's been programmed into the technology. Because it doesn't actually, even though it acts like a person and we want to tell it thanks and things like that, sometimes it's still just telling us what we want to hear. So that's really, it's interesting to put that element of doubt in there, ask it to, review itself or review what you think. But yeah, there's been some crazy news stories about weird things that the AI has done in trying to make people happy. So that is a bias in the technology, or potential bias in the technology, that may not advantage or disadvantage anyone particularly, but it's something you definitely need to be aware and be cautious of as you're using it. So yeah, and 100% agree with Meredith here. So
yes, true. I mean, on that point, I'm definitely happy that we, at least for us, talking about us, maybe most of the audience here, we managed to live a meaningful part of our life in a world without AI. Because I'm thinking about, my kids are teenagers. I know yours are a bit older, but for them, that's gonna be like they don't know that there's a world without it, right? They're talking about without that experience. So I think maybe talking about future generation responsibility will be obviously to keep those guardrails to make sure, because it's very easy to just have a conversation with AI and get into, it's making me feel very good about myself, and maybe I don't need to speak with others who don't make me feel so good about myself. So definitely an interesting angle there.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see how this plays out in things like education. I know there's a lot of nervousness and apprehension right now that, kids are just going to take the easy way, and not just kids, like college students or even us as adults, take the easy way, take the answer that's prepped for you, go from there, and without applying the critical thinking or developing those critical thinking research skills that are so important to have in life. But at the same time, I think, we're not going to be able to stop this tidal wave that's already started. So I think, again, it's about how do we teach, ourselves and, all generations, both younger and older, the limitations of it and how to use it responsibly. And, I think it's a great question that Karen Menendez out there.
So sometimes you're using the tools that are provided, like Gemini, right? And
yeah, I mean, I think, we don't have the big budget to build or buy a lot of the technology. So I think we're mainly leaning in on the tools that are already available to us through the company. A lot of those have AI built in, some kind of AI functionality, and are continuing to do that to enhance that. Even things like the Gemini through Google Suite, right, or Copilot in Microsoft products. But then I think we've used built out a lot of interesting things using Asana, which is a tool that we have available internally. High level, I think people probably think of as a project management tool, but it has some cool functionality where we can each put our individual goals in, tie those to team goals, link those goals to like task projects portfolios. And as we complete those things, it automatically updates our goals and rolls that into a strategy roadmap for the team. So again, we didn't have to do anything there. That was through a tool that was already available to us in-house. And then obviously our suppliers, really interested to see what are our suppliers doing, what's already available, what do they have in their roadmap to do going forward, to understand, because I do think, obviously the type of work that we do, which is kind of some of the white collar office type jobs, are those that are most likely to be impacted by AI. I think that's fair to say. Like if you're, I mentioned someone else, my son, now trying to be an adult. He works as an EMT, about to be a paramedic, works on the ambulance. AI can't pick up a patient and get them to the hospital, right? So, I mean, they made the tools and technology in the ambulance may get better, but somebody physically still has to do that. Whereas my job is much more likely to be hit and transformed by AI. But that being said, we've got, to think about all these things downstream, what's going on. So we're using the tools internally, looking at our suppliers, expecting big things from them, and looking forward to what can come. And then to the extent that it becomes easier over time, like to build a chat bot or create your own agent or whatever. I mean, we're going to work towards learning those skills and applying it where we can. But, again, our size of program, we don't have budget to do a lot of in-house. But I'd love to hear what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and feel free to share that in the comments. I can share from, all the conversations I really had, I would say probably with 70 or 100 different teams. I don't see any of them building their own AI capabilities. Even companies like Microsoft, who develop their own AI, are not using that in mobility. They are leaning on their partners. We've launched with Microsoft a first solution on AI almost 2 years ago, and we've been working with them, and it makes sense, right? Let's think about some of the largest payment companies, the largest banks. They use providers to make payments to their employees. They don't build it their own. They build solutions for their customers.
Right.
And in all places, we've seen that, right? Technology companies are using technology built by other companies. They don't build that in-house. And I think that's not going to change also in the way of how AI is utilized. So
yeah,
absolutely, mobility teams will be utilizing the tools provided to the rest of the company, like the ones you've outlined, like Copilot, etc. And of course, we'll be leaning on their vendors. And I agree with you that there is value in learning that technology, but I also think we need to kind of embrace the fact that not everyone needs to be a technology expert, not everyone needs to be a developer, and I think as mobility leaders, we need to be mobility experts, not to become suddenly IT expert, because that's not going to happen, right? Yeah. And we're not going to be as good in that in the world. We need to be able to use those tools, but not to be those experts who build them or or testing them or reinforcing. They need to work for us, not the other way around. And I think that's kind of the vision of where AI needs to come into mobility.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, totally. Even within a tech company, which my last couple roles have been in tech, the money that is available to build things should be put. As much as I'd love to have some of it for myself, selfishly for the team, the money that we have to invest in technology should be put to benefiting our customers. And in Dee's case, that's employers and job seekers. We want to help more people get jobs, and that's a great goal. And how could I begrudge the money going to that purpose instead of just building something for my team? So certainly understand that is a business need. So again, I think there are a lot of tools that are out there that you may already have available in your suite. Maybe you haven't used them much or haven't taken advantage of them, but I would encourage you. I think Karen Menendez says she's going to look at Asana now. So look at the ones that are out there, figure out what capabilities they have that are already available through your company. I know, companies like Lucidchart and Lucid Miro, others, they're putting AI technology in there. So, look at what you already have available, take advantage of that, see how it can help your team, and then talk to your suppliers. Those would be my big recommendations.
100% agree with that. It's the responsibility of the suppliers to provide those solutions, to provide the efficiency and to help mobility leaders be the experts in what they do internally. That's why the suppliers are there for. Interesting comment there on that we see more and more about repetitive tasks, and I like to quote here from Brian. He's saying, like, if a task is being done more than once, we should challenge, should that be automated? And I'll take that as a segue to move into another trend that I've been seeing in the last few months when talking to CHROs and VPs of reward, etc., is that there is almost a shift in companies' focus towards AI. So everyone's been talking about AI now for 2 years, but suddenly something in the larger organizations, perhaps indeed is more a AI first company, being a technology company in the space of recruitment. But even in larger companies, we've started to see in the last few months a lot more C-suites and CHRO talking about the importance of using that internally. And was curious to see if you see the same, Karen, and if so, kind of what drives that?
Yeah, I mean, I think companies see the advantage of getting work done faster. Perhaps more. The goal would be more error-free, taking out the human error potential out of an equation. So, and maybe cheaper. I think that cheaper part is what scares everyone a little bit, because if the technology can do the work, maybe you need less people to do it. But again, I think, while we're at that moment right now, that's what we need to be thinking about. Are there new skills the team needs to be developing? Again, I mentioned this before, but if we do free up some time, where will we spend that time wisely and to continue to show the strategic value we bring to the company? And I think that's for all companies. I know my husband's in construction engineering, so far from mobility, but he, he's on an AI task force at his company. And I said, and he was kind of like, I don't know about this. It may take away some of the work that we do behind the scenes. And I said, well, it's better to be part of the change than to be caught off guard by the change on the back end. So buy in, take advantage of this, learn some new skills, kind of understand what this means for your team, for the work that they do. So I think, definitely, if a company's not looking at it, they're going to fall behind competitively. I think that's, the reality that we're all in right now. And it'll be one of the things I'm curious to see is which companies lean into thinking AI means less people and potentially means job reductions, which none of us would like to hear. Or the companies say, okay, we freed up bandwidth to now apply the people that we have to more strategic, innovative, initiatives to drive our company forward. And I think those are choices C-suite's going to have to make in the near future. And potentially it's going to be disruptive for the next few years. I think eventually it will stabilize, but we may see disruption in the kinds of jobs and all the things that are going to be coming our way. So again, I would say buy into the change, learn what you can, think about what this means short-term, long-term, and be ready, because this world is crazy. This world of mobility just continues to change and change.
I completely agree. I think it's a great way to wrap up this discussion, because basically it says the task is on us, right? We have here the opportunity to rewrite our future, and we need to take the reins, and we need to be those who are driving. Otherwise, someone else will do it for us, and we don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So that's great tip.
Don't get left behind. Kind of buy in and think about this. I know we're all tired. We've had more than our fair share of change in recent years, but this will be a great opportunity to kind of help guide the future of our programs in the industry.
Fantastic. All right, I'll try to wrap up the way Brian does, but I don't have the access to his tool. So let's see.
Hello,
Brian.
We missed you, Brian.
I've been waiting backstage because I don't know what it is. It's not my Wi-Fi connection. I've changed everything on that. There's a problem going on with StreamYard, which we'll deal with later. But you did amazingly, Nick and Karen, everybody else. It was quite incredible. If I get cut out again, somebody hit the end stream button. But meanwhile, we're going to bring back, I've had so much fun. I'm going to bring back onto stage the amazing Julie Barron, the amazing Julia Onslow-Cole. And thank you for your updates. Oh, and my colleague Matt Cheek is here too. Thank you. It's been so much fun for me watching this backstage, and you guys doing absolutely amazingly. I don't need AI to make myself redundant. I've managed to do it all by myself. So quite an incredible session. Karen, thank you so much for your insights. Really useful. Nitsan, I know there's a lot to come. There's big announcements to come in a couple of weeks. We're keeping that slightly under wraps. So this is informally our teaser announcement. Something really cool is coming down the road in just a couple of weeks. So we'll be sharing all that in a while. Meanwhile, all that really remains for me to do is to say thank you to our amazing audience. Thank you to our guests, Karen, Julie, Julia, to Nitsan for standing in so ably for me. Always good when you get the CEO to stand in for you. Thank you to our wonderful audience, and a special thank you to Michelle Curran, who's been backstage doing all the producer stuff, and a big happy birthday to Tali Gorin, who's currently on a beach somewhere in Bulgaria, and it's her birthday tomorrow. So from everybody in the audience, and we know what great work you do, happy birthday, Tali. That's it. This is the view from the top. We are back next week. Everybody have a great week. Take care and goodbye.